welcome back. All right, so power rankings. Saturday night. It is that time, although by the time this goes up, it'll be after midnight here, so technically it'll be Sunday everywhere. But I'll still title it as being for January the 14th. So, that being said, there is some rather large movement by some teams this week. I'm wearing Philly because they had a pretty good week, right? And they've had a couple of pretty good weeks. And who knows where this is going to go. So number 32 this week, same spot as last week, and that is Chicago. So Chicago is still at the bottom. They had a 3-game winning streak. It came to a screeching halt tonight against the Seattle Kraken, and I still see them as being at the bottom of the league because they're still and that this is where that comes in, that a team can go on a winning streak but have lost so many games that it's tough for them to make up that distance. And it's the same with teams at the top. You can build up a large cushion so that you can lose a few and not drop very much. Number 31, and staying in the same spot as last week as well. So staying in the same spot is Columbus. For the Blue Jackets, they obviously had a win tonight over Detroit, so that helps their overall standing. But, I mean, really, these teams are into better luck next year territory. And, it's the Happy Gilmore reference, because that's how I picture it each time. But yeah, so for Columbus, it's been a rough year. It doesn't seem to be getting a lot better. They get the win over Detroit tonight, though. They do hold on and win that one. And in the end, we may just look back on these and say, if they'd lost that game and if they'd been in this spot for the draft lottery and all that fun stuff. So number 30, dropping 3 spots from last week, Anaheim. Rough week for Anaheim. And as bad as Anaheim was, and I mean, they've lost 19-5 in their last 3 games. I still said, well, I can't have them below Columbus or Chicago because of how rough the seasons have been for Columbus and Chicago. So, I mean, if Anaheim keeps losing at the rate they've been losing, sure, they may end up back down in 32nd, but for now, they're 30th. I'll be in Anaheim in a couple of weeks, so I hope people in that area are forgiving of where their team is on the power rankings. Number 29, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Arizona. So Arizona's lost a lot of games in a row. It has been a very rough last month and such for them. And yet, they're still 29th on the board. They're not quite at the bottom. So we have 4 teams here that are putting together some pretty horrendous records, which means that if your team plays against these teams and plays them a lot, then you're going to end up getting a little bit of a boost. The nice thing, too, though, is you got Central, Metro, Pacific, Central. So 2 of them are Central Division teams. 1 of them's a Metro. 1 of them's from the Pacific. The one that's not on the board yet is the Atlantic, and it's going to be a bit before the bottom team in the Atlantic ends up on the board. Number 28, moving up 2 spots from last week. So a bit of a surprise that they move up, but here we are. Grab this one. So again, I've got all the pucks set up, where I've got all 32 teams set up, and there's San Jose. So San Jose moves up 2 spots from last week. And, again, it really is a matter of which team is playing better amongst the teams that have really rough records. And even though San Jose takes kind of a spanking yesterday, they still end up moving up because of how abysmally bad things have been for Arizona and Anaheim. So that's where we are in the season. We have got 5 teams that we know aren't going to be playing games of real consequence from here on. And we've got half a season left. So this is what makes it fun, right? That's fun, right? Number 27, dropping 1 spot from last week. I'll use this puck here. Vancouver. So for the Canucks, it's been a long year, and it's only half done. So I really wish they'd pace themselves and have just take some time off from having something bad happen. That'd be nice. It doesn't have to play out as an 82-game horror movie, but here we are. The Canucks dropped to 27th. Again, they weren't expected to be here. Even if they weren't going to be a playoff team, at least they were supposed to be competitive, and no. The East Coast swing has been kind of what I had expected, and that's too bad. Number 26, moving up 3 spots from last week, is Montreal. So for the Habs, they move up in part because of how the other teams are doing right now. Montreal not doing as badly as the others, even though Montreal's record hasn't been fantastic either. But this is the state of the NHL right now, where you have some teams with really bad records and some teams that aren't necessarily doing very well, but they still end up being ahead of other teams because they're doing worse. I do wonder, like, if I did a power rankings where it was just the top 24, would it be better? I know the answer is no. You have to do all 32 teams. You can't drop it to 24. I just will continue to try to find something of positivity for any of these teams from here going forward. Beacons of positivity and all that. Number 25, dropping into the bottom row this week. They were not the bottom row last week, and that's Ottawa. So Ottawa drops 2 spots. They're now down to 25th. The loss against Colorado tonight, that is abysmal. That's something that you just can't have. You can't have that kind of game when you need to get wins going. And again, this is something I've been saying. I know media's been saying it too. They need to get on a streak. They need to start winning like 5, 6 in a row or 8 out of 10. They need a streak like that. And there's no signs with the Ottawa Senators that that's coming right now. So that rounds out your bottom row. I think we can agree that of the teams on this section of the board, Ottawa's the only one that might have a chance. But I'm saying might because it is a slim chance right now making the playoffs. Number 24, moving up 1 spot from last week. So they did move up, and that's Detroit. Detroit takes the loss tonight against Columbus, but really with them moving up, it has more to do with the win over Toronto than anything else. That was an impressive victory for them. But again, for Detroit, I don't think they're going to be in the playoffs at the end of the year. 24 is, I think, the right spot for Detroit right now. Remember when they were 15th, and I said I think 15th's a good spot, and 17th, and yeah, good times. Those times are done. And so for Detroit, they are 24th on the board. We'll see what happens upcoming weeks. They're not out of it by any stretch. I think they're in better shape than Ottawa right now to make the playoffs, but it's faint praise at this point in time. Number 23, dropping 4 spots from last week. 4. Kind of a surprise they're this low, and that's Colorado. Kind of a surprise because with Colorado, I had figured that when Nathan MacKinnon came back, all right, so things are going to get a lot better. And maybe tonight's game over Ottawa is a sign they're ready to start going, but I didn't bump them up the board by beating Ottawa. I just bumped Ottawa down. So for Colorado, we'll see what happens in the upcoming weeks, but they're really flirting with missing the playoffs. They need to take that 7-0 win tonight and springboard that into something else, because otherwise, yeah, we're going to see a defending Stanley Cup champion miss the playoffs for the first time since, I want to say 2013. Was it 2013? Was it the Kings? I want to say it was the Kings, but I know Carolina did miss the playoffs the year after they won the Stanley Cup. So it's rare, but it does happen on occasion, and Colorado might be next. And it will be injury that took them out of the playoffs. I don't think there's any reason to panic, but when you're losing a year of prime hockey from guys like Makar and McKinnon and Rantanen, it does sting. So number 22 on the board, same spot as last week, and that is St. Louis. So for the Blues, they get the win over Calgary, and then they lost to Calgary, and then tonight they lose against Tampa. They're just not getting much of a foothold right now in the West. So yeah, St. Louis, a really kind of a mediocre week. It ends up with them staying in the same spot that they were last week. And at this point, Philadelphia fans are saying, you've forgotten us. I can't believe you've forgotten us. You're going to have to start over. The reality is I've not forgotten Philadelphia. Philadelphia is moving up 3 spots from last week. And there they are. Philadelphia is up to 21st on the power rankings. They're back to NHL 500. It's been a gradual move up the board. So last week they moved up 3 spots. This week they moved up 3 spots. So over a 2-week period, they've gone from here to here. And I don't know how legit this is. I don't know how long they can go. But they're definitely doing a pretty good job right now of at least looking like they're ready to get back into the hunt. And that's as close as I can get to being specific on it, because it is really tough to keep winning at that rate. But it is a testament to John Tortorella's coaching. And again, I'm not saying he's coach of the year material or anything, but you can see that they're listening to him. They're playing his system. It's not the most exciting hockey, but he's definitely helped Carter Hart get to a bounce back season. And Philadelphia's playing games that are important on some level at this point in the season, which was not expected. Number 20. same spot as last week. So no change at number 20, Florida. Florida, the losses that they've been having are frustrating. Their ability to get back to 500 is there. They get back to NHL 500 with the win over Vancouver tonight. But they managed to lose the next game more often than not. So I'm not expecting Florida to go on a streak. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs because I've said it in previous weeks and it just hasn't happened. So we're halfway through the year. I think what you see is what you get with Florida. And so we'll see whether or not. But keep in mind, Philadelphia's at NHL 500 and so is Florida. So they're both in very similar positions right now. And Philadelphia's doing this and Florida's just kind of meandering along at that 500 record. Number 19, moving up 2 spots from last week. Use this one. I'm just picking which pucks I'm going to use. Getting creative here. And that's Nashville. And then people will say, well, he used all the same pucks as last week. Well, Nashville moves up a couple of spots. The loss against Buffalo tonight, I didn't really penalize them for that one. I didn't penalize them for the loss against Toronto. I think they're playing well enough that 19th is where I'm going to throw them. And when I say they're playing well enough, I mean their goaltenders have really helped. But Nashville's in the hunt. I don't know that they necessarily get in the West, but they're in the hunt, and there have been some wins along the way as well. So we will see whether or not Nashville ends up in the playoffs. My guess is probably not, but we do have 40 games left. And so Nashville, they're staying in. And again, I didn't penalize them for the Buffalo game. Number 18, dropping 4 spots from last week. 4 spots. Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is now into the 3rd row. I had not expected Pittsburgh to end up that low on the board at all this season. So Pittsburgh has been in the 3rd row earlier in the year, but they moved all the way up to 4th? A month ago they were 4th, and they had won, I think, 14 out of 18 games, something ridiculous like that, and now they're cratering again. Now, tonight's loss against Carolina, it wasn't they played really bad. They didn't. They played okay and for long stretches of it, but they get the loss. And that's been the story with Pittsburgh for weeks now. They just managed to pull losses out. And so they end up making their way down the board. Not as fast as people want, and I know teams don't move up or down the board as fast as people want, but that's kind of how power rankings work, especially once you're a half a season in. Where, yeah, a team might go 2-1 that week, but I may not move them up. A team may go 1-2 that week. I may not move them down. It really is kind of about, okay, what do I think is going to happen next week? So, yeah, Pittsburgh, number 18 on the board. Number 17, dropping 6 spots from where they were last week. Buffalo. So for the Sabres, it has been a relatively tough week for them. The win over Nashville helped because coming into tonight, they were lower than 17th. They have had... It's weird with Buffalo, isn't it? How feast and famine they are. They're also one of those teams that's better on the road than at home. And that definitely is something that needs to be looked at. A power ranking of teams at home, teams on the road. I'm considering doing that for the week that we're in California, doing a power ranking where I would make that at home before we go and make that for home power rankings, road power rankings, because during the week that we're out, there's only a handful of games on. It's not going to make a big difference to that power ranking that would post on the Saturday, and so I'm considering doing that for the week that we're not going to be home, because I'm not taking this through TSA. I'm not trying. It's no chance. I'm not going to go to Alaska Airlines and go, hey, so come on, this is my carry-on. I think it's going to work. So, yeah, 17 for Buffalo. I do really hope Buffalo pulls this off in the second half of the season because their expansion brethren in Vancouver aren't. Number 16, moving up 1 spot from last week, Calgary. Calgary had a week this week where they went 2-0-2. But if you look at it, so they started the week with a loss in overtime against Chicago, which was alarming. They lost in overtime against St. Louis. Then they beat St. Louis. And then they hung on today against Dallas. They played a good first half of the game, and then the second half was all Dallas. And they almost ended up in an overtime situation, which would have been fun because neither Calgary nor Dallas are very good in overtime. So I don't know who would have won that one in overtime. We didn't find out. But, yeah, Calgary ends up 16th on the board because overall, I thought the only game that they played where I was really impressed with them was that win over St. Louis. I wasn't impressed with their 60 minutes today, nor was I impressed with them losing in overtime against Chicago. And so they only end up moving up the one spot. And this is where the idea that, well, a team gets points, so they should move up. Not necessarily. It really depends on how they're playing as well. Number 15, moving up 3 spots from last week, New York Islanders. For the Islanders, I thought they had a decent week. Overall, a better week than the previous one. The previous one, they dropped 6 spots, so they've got half of that back this week. With the win tonight and the loss for Pittsburgh, they are above the playoff line. Pittsburgh's below the playoff line. That's going to be fun to watch the rest of the way and see if Buffalo gets into that hunt as well. But yeah, the Islanders, they get the win over Montreal. Montreal, of course, being at this point on the board, but I felt like 15 was a good spot for the Islanders this week. We'll see how they do this coming week. Number 14, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Oilers. So for Edmonton, they move up as well. So both Alberta teams are now on this side of the board. Things are good. For Edmonton, going in and beating Vegas in Vegas tonight, that's a pretty big deal. Being able to hold them off in the third period, I thought was pretty impressive as well. Vegas was doing their rope-a-dope, where for the first 10 minutes, they're kind of sleepy, and then they just take over the game. And Edmonton managed to hold on to the lead and win the game there. So for the Oilers, I think their game is going pretty well. They've won, 3 in a row right now? This is the second time this season they've won 3 in a row. And, of course, they had a really good second half last year. So maybe we're getting that started again this year. Number 13. Same spot as last week for LA. So LA is kind of in a spot where I comfortable with them being. The problem with LA is simple. So tonight they lose against New Jersey, which isn't something I penalize them for. But their goaltending is still an issue where Jonathan Quick, there's a couple of goals tonight that I thought were savable that the LA announcers thought were savable as well. And that's important too, is that it's not just me, but I'll watch the announcers and listen to the announcers, watch the broadcast and just see like, okay, so it's just they say the same thing. So for LA, the record is decent. They're still in a good spot to maybe end up winning that division. It could happen. It's a 3-headed beast right now between Vegas, Seattle, and LA. But I have concerns about the goaltending. I really have serious concerns about the goaltending. Number 12, dropping 2 spots from last week. Not a great week for them, and that's Dallas. Dallas falls out of first place technically. It's a technicality because Winnipeg has a game in hand on them. They have the same amount of points. But Dallas has been trending in an iffy direction for the last few weeks. I know I've been accused of being alarmist about it before. I'll probably be accused of it again, but I'm not impressed. Like, yes, today they almost came back and tied it, but they were behind 6-1. Like, it's just embarrassing. You're at home. That shouldn't happen. So for Dallas, yeah, I busted them down a little bit for what I thought was a subpar week. They need to win some games because Winnipeg's heated up. And I still think Minnesota's going to be dangerous. And for Dallas, I've said for weeks and weeks now, I do have concerns. And it's not me trying to punish a team that I cheer for just because I don't want to seem like I'm playing favorites. I genuinely have concerns with the Dallas Stars at this point. And yeah, when they lose 6-5 at home, that really causes my radar to kind of go crazy. Number 11, moving down 3 spots from last week. The Capitals. So the Caps, rough loss tonight against Philadelphia, and so I've moved them out of the top 10. Ovechkin, of course, gets goal number 810 tonight. Kudos to him for that. But for the Capitals in general, and part of this could be, so you get back your players. You get back Wilson, you get back Backstrom. It can take a while for them to get back into the swing of things. And it can take a while for your lines to adjust and for everybody to get it going. So I'm not that concerned with the loss tonight against Philadelphia. I'm not and I mean, Hart steals that one too, right? So I'm not overly concerned, but I felt like there were 10 teams that were ahead of them this week. And that's really where they're at. But they can move back into the top 10 next week. It's quite possible. Number 10, moving up 2 spots from last week. Devils. Now, the Devils are playing much better. Here's the problem. The Devils are fantastic on the road. They're mediocre at home. If they have home ice advantage in the playoffs, is it an advantage? Now, I will also throw this out there. We've had this discussion going into playoff series before. The playoffs are a different beast. Teams that are bad on the road can be good on the road in the playoffs, and vice versa. A team that's really bad at home can be good at home in the playoffs. And of course, you switch that around too. But for New Jersey, great road trip. They go through California. They won both games of the back-to-back. They made it look kind of easy against LA. Of course, I've talked about with LA where my concerns lie, but they really shut it down. LA pulled the goaltender early in that third period, and they didn't get a single shot on net. So New Jersey's got their game together right now. They're playing quite well, and so they end up back in the top 10. Number 9, same spot as last week for the New York Rangers. So the Rangers, not quite in the top row yet, but they're close. The Rangers, that comeback victory over Dallas, big part of the reason why there's that separation between the Rangers and Dallas right now. Impressive comeback by the Rangers. An almost perfect road game by Dallas, but they were definitely allowing too many opportunities late in that game. So the Rangers get credit for that, and I think the Rangers are going to be a team to watch in the second half, because Shesterkin's numbers, while they've been good, they can be better. We know they can be better, and so I'm concerned about them in the second half of the season as somebody that could see one of his favorite teams against them in the playoffs relatively early, depending on how everything settles out, right? Number 8. So top row, but not number 5 anymore. It's Vegas. Vegas drops 3 spots. They really are going to miss Mark Stone. I would be very surprised if Vegas is in the top row next week. They also have Seattle breathing down their necks, LA breathing down their necks, and so there's a lot of reason to think that for Vegas, who looked home and cleared early on in the season, things are starting to turn. So we'll see how it goes. Their overall numbers and points percentage are still good, but yeah, there's definitely some red flags there when it comes to the injuries, which have started to raise their head again for the Vegas Golden Knights, which is too bad, because Stone, of course, we know his injury history is a long one, and he's just one of those guys that's you're going to probably lose him for a month out of any given season. Right now he's listed as week to week. They're being very cloak and dagger about it. We don't even know what exactly it is, and that's concerning, because if it was just a minor injury, A, it wouldn't be week to week, and B, they probably wouldn't be cloak and dagger about it. Number 7, moving up a bunch, moving up a lot, moving up 8 spots is Seattle. Now, here's the funny thing. So Seattle goes out on this road trip. They set a record. They win all 7 games on a 7-game road trip. I expect them to go home and struggle at home. It is a weird season, and I know I saw an article on TSN which was about how home ice hasn't been home ice advantage this year. And I remember looking at that article and thinking, it depends on the team. There are some teams that are very good at home. There are some teams that are very good on the road, and wanting to do that comparison. So that's definitely, the longer we go into this season, the more I'm convinced I have to do that video. So it's going to happen. Throwing it into the power rankings because I got to do that. And Seattle's one of those examples. On the road, they're fantastic. And at home, they're good. They have a decent home record, but it's not a great home record. If they had a great home record, they'd have Vegas in the rearview mirror in the standings by a lot. Probably be about 6 or 8 points ahead of Vegas. So we'll see if the wins on the road lead to some wins at home. We'll see, right? But for Seattle, everything's going really well. I had no problem moving them up. So last week, I know there was a lot of complaining about why is Seattle so low. And now they're in the top row. Again, I understand that it may seem like there's a delay, but that's on purpose. I don't want to move a team way up and then move them right back down, way down the next week. Number 6, dropping 3 spots from last week. Minnesota. Actually, I'll use this side. Minnesota. So the Wild, they drop a few spots, and I know there will still be people who say they're too high, and I understand, but they've had a good record. The win tonight over Arizona was a little less impressive than some of their other victories. They did have their struggles against Arizona tonight. But yeah, Minnesota still 6th on the board. They do drop a few spots from where they were last week. But what's interesting is in the top 5, all of these teams have had their challenges lately. And so, again, because it's January, that is to be expected. It is a very long season. For Minnesota, they're right in the hunt. And so I wouldn't count them out as potentially winning the division, potentially being second in the division. We'll see how things shake down in the second half of the year. Number 5. Moving up 1 spot from last week, Tampa. So Tampa Bay, again, the comments I see are, why is Tampa so high? Oh, Tampa so high. Well, in this case, Tampa Bay had a very good homestand, and then today they went on the road. It is in St. Louis. St. Louis is one of those teams that struggles to win at home. But for Tampa, it felt like this was an important game, and it wasn't really in doubt either. Like, I didn't feel like watching that one that St. Louis was going to come back. And St. Louis is capable of some pretty dramatic comebacks. So, impressive road win by Tampa Bay. Impressive game by Vasilevsky, and we'll see how they follow that up. Does Stamkos get his 500 this week? Because I'm doing a career video on Stamkos once he hits 500, and we've been delayed. Really delayed. He's still getting assists. He's just not getting goals. Number 4 on the board this week. Moving up 3 spots from last week, Winnipeg. The Jets are really making believers out of me. Making a believer out of me, and my wife as well. That way it's believers out of us. But I said believers out of me as if there's more than one of me, which there's not, contrary to popular belief. Number 4 being Winnipeg. I'm comfortable with them at 4. Tonight before the games were over, I was looking at the rankings, and I was making some adjustments. And I did adjust Winnipeg up a little bit. I thought, Winnipeg has been playing really well. They've got all 4 lines. They've gotten healthy. Ehlers has looked fantastic since his return. He's on a 4-game point streak. So I kind of feel like Winnipeg belongs in the top 4 right now. We'll see how they do this week, but I've got them at number 4. Number 3. Same spot as last week for Carolina. Yes, Carolina's had their challenges, but with that win tonight over Pittsburgh, I felt like, they're going to be fine. They're going to be just fine. Carolina in the 3rd spot, I think, is the right spot for them right now. I debated about whether or not to have them in 2nd, and there's definitely an argument to be made. So, we will talk about 2nd place here, because I have Toronto in 2nd. Now, Toronto loses against Boston tonight. I thought they played well. Toronto lost against Detroit. Carolina having their challenges as well. So if you want to switch the 2, you can. You can. You can switch the 2. Not a problem. You can write it on your monitor, on your TV. I'm just kidding. But it is tough, right? Because Toronto's had some setbacks lately. Carolina's had some setbacks lately. And I really agonized over which one to put where. I've opted to leave Toronto in 2nd spot where they were coming into tonight, and leave Carolina in 3rd where they were coming into tonight. Because losing in Boston is something almost everybody does, except these guys down here who have cruised up the board, right? The way that I used to do the power rankings board, which was just purely on reaction to, who wins and who loses, Seattle would probably be number 2 on the board right now with how I used to do the power rankings. I'm fine with Toronto being 2nd, but there's sort of an asterisk there. Absolutely. Again, Carolina could go 2nd. I know there will be other teams that people think should be 2nd, but again, I'm leaving that as it is. So Toronto moves up 2 spots. Carolina drops 1 spot from where they were last week, and we'll see what happens in the upcoming week. Which means that number 1 on the board, and this won't really surprise people, is once again Boston. For Boston, they lose that first game at home in regulation. I felt that really reflected on how well Seattle played. Seattle came in to play Boston hockey in Boston. How rude. They came in, they beat them, they played their own game to beat them, and Boston had no answer throughout that game. So Boston comes back, they beat Toronto tonight. If they hadn't beaten Toronto tonight, they probably still would be in first place for the same reason that Chicago's in last place. Boston's kind of earned that first place spot right now. These teams here, there's still some issues there too that I don't think I would necessarily put them at number 1 right now, but we could see some movement next week in the top row. Absolutely could. It's a very busy week we have coming up. Things are very busy between now and the, I wanted to say trade deadline, but it's the All-Star break. And so look for some movement over the next couple of weeks. But I think things look good right now. So there you go. And again, I know there will be some furrowed brows at where teams are. And I'll even pick out where I think it'll be. New Jersey fans will say they're too low. Seattle fans will say they're too low. People will say Minnesota's too high. Tampa's too high. Carolina, Toronto are too high. Capitals might have dropped too low for some. Some will say the Kings should be higher. The Flames fans will probably say they should be higher. Colorado fans might be upset that they're this low, or they might be upset that they're too high. And of course, there will be others as well. There'll be reactions too. Happens every week. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.